President Trump appears to be crashing out in response to Vladimir Putin repeatedly frustrating his attempts to achieve peace in Ukraine. But is Trump going to actually do anything, or is he going to join the long line of presidents who simply are unwilling to confront the world's most bloodthirsty dictator? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to talk about that, plus the fact that Vladimir Putin seems to think he's near victory, even if he needs to loot his entire country to do so. Let's get into it. Okay. Now, this, I think, was absolutely crazy because we've seen Trump get more and more at least profane about his dealings with other countries, being repeatedly frustrated by them. He says, quote, Putin is throwing BS at us. This is in a White House press conference when he was asked explicitly about his frustration in dealing with Putin vis-a-vis Ukraine. He said, quote, we get a lot of, and I can't repeat this, BS thrown at us by Putin if you want to know the truth, he told reporters during the meeting. He said, quote, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. The U.S. president, though, this I thought was even more interesting, is that even though he's expressing frustration, Trump has declined to commit to supporting increased sanctions on Russia when asked by reporters during a press conference whether he would support Senator Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill against Russia and countries purchasing Russian fuel and minerals, right? Bear in mind, guys, that sanctions and a tariff are just different words for the exact same thing, right? Russian oil is sanctioned, but it effectively is tariffed as well, in which it cannot be purchased for any price below a certain price point. Effectively the same thing as saying, hey, we're imposing a large tariff to drive down the proceeds of that oil. So this is a fascinating because, again, Trump said, quote, we're looking at that. It's an optional bill, totally at my option. To sign or terminate the bill, totally at my option. I'm looking at it very strongly. He added, Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons, and I've approved that. Again, I want to point out that Trump seems to repeatedly misunderstand. This was never constitutionally, this is congressionally approved aid to Ukraine. And so legally, he's not supposed to be able to decide. He can make, again, small decisions about the timing of these weapons, but congressionally approved funds have to be executed in the way Congress has mandated. That's how the law works. That's how the Constitution works. But again, the fact is that this is the first time we've seen him be so combative with Vladimir Putin. The problem is that Trump says a great many things. Remember, he wanted to literally take over Greenland by force just 2 months ago. And we could see that, well, he just said a lot of stuff and it didn't really go anywhere. So the fact is that when asked, hey, okay, you're mad. Is this going to go anywhere? Are you going to roll out more sanctions? He goes, no, I'm not. So again, even the political headline, Trump finally fed up with Putin, teases more Russian sanctions. This is really just not this is not someone who's taking this action. And I want to point out that, again, Senate Majority Leader John Thune said there's, quote, a lot of interest in the legislation among senators and said he could bring the legislation to the floor soon. But this is, again, senators also follow the same Trump playbook of saying just whatever fucking old thing. But then when it comes time to actually take action, nothing happens. And this is fascinating because if there really is all this interest among senators and a large bipartisan majority in Congress that supports Ukraine and supports confronting Russia, where's the legislation that says that? If that were true, Congress would pass legislation that says, here's additional aid to Ukraine. President Trump, we're pushing it through. You could do it with a veto-proof majority. If enough Republicans support it and enough Democrats support it, then it could probably get pushed through and Trump would have no choice but to accept it. But of course, the fact is that this is just talk. This is just empty talk from empty American politicians, right? Meaningless suits. The legislation that is being proposed would impose high tariff on countries that import Russian energy and implement secondary sanctions on foreign firms that support Russian energy production. This is interesting because it would involve throwing high tariffs on China, who is a large buyer of Russian oil, as well as India. And this is actually probably an actual problem for President Trump if his goal is to, again, play the game of slice a big tariff onto countries and then negotiate them down. The fact is that he claims to have finally had some sort of deal reached with China, but then to turn around and say, actually, guys, also, we have this asterisk that you can't buy Russian oil. it's fascinating, again, for a bunch of reasons, but most notably that this could have been a topic of conversation in the first round. And the fact that it wasn't is a sign that, again, the president isn't really all that interested, right? Again, President Trump could have also used those negotiations as a chance to tell China, listen, you are the biggest enabler of Russia. You can get in line. This is the difference between good governance and sort of cringy, childish governance, is that nobody is sitting there with the president and saying, listen, here's a list of all of our interests in China. Fentanyl, right? Their support for Russia's war in Ukraine, the Chinese aggression in the South China Sea, their exercises towards Taiwan, the Chinese systematic hacking of U.S. national security data and national security firms' IP, Chinese enabling of North Korea to get a nuclear weapon, right? There's all of these things. And if you're going to carve out a deal with China, you need the deal to at least sort of address all of these things. And so the fact is that his deal didn't address any of these things. It purely was just like tariff up, tariff down. And this is some pretty like low level governance here. This is pretty simple governance. And it's one of the reasons why Trump is resorting to swearing, right? This is, again, sort of like when you are totally impotent to do anything. All you have left to do is sit in your car and scream, right? And that, unfortunately, is, I think, what Trump feels like is the only options available to him, probably because instead of being surrounded by professional policymakers, he's surrounded by some goobery goobers. And we're going to talk about even, frankly, some of the senators that confirmed Trump's goobery goobers are still pretty mad about it. But before we talk about that, you guys may notice that I've been pretty critical of both administrations. And part of the reason I can do that is because I am fully, totally independent. I don't depend on major media outlets. I don't depend on sponsors. I don't depend on donors. I depend on you guys. And that is the members of combatvetnews.com. This functions exactly like my Patreon. And today we are going to be dropping an uncensored combat footage review videos that, boy, YouTube would never in a million years let me show you. Plus, for the Lieutenant Colonel tier members, you're going to get your weekly Q&As. You've sent me a lot of crazy questions, and I have dropped answers. So if you want to support me, keep me able to do this every single day, 7 days a week, despite me having a literal 2-week-old in my house and a toddler, you guys are the one. You guys want to become members over on Combat Vet News. The link is in the description. Okay. So this is fascinating because literally one of the top-ranking Senate Republicans actually called Hegseth an amateur who was out of his depth. This is a Republican senator from North Carolina, Tom Tillis. This is a Republican senator from a turbo-red state. The fact that he's still able to sit there and say that Pete Hegseth is, well, literally amateurish. Tillis called the weapons decision amateurish to Jake Tapper in his first sit-down interview since announcing he's retiring from the Senate, so he can finally go fully unhinged. Tillis continued, quote, "That's from somebody who doesn't understand large organization dynamics, ding, ding, ding," adding that he does not regret voting to confirm Hegseth in January with the information he had at the time. FYI, guys, as we talked about on this channel, it's the burden of being right all the time. But again, this is why you guys tune in, because I actually have analysis, because I'm not some partisan hack who's just going to repeat leftist or right-wing talking points. But we talked about this, the fact that Hegseth's resume is that of someone who has never headed an organization of any size. The largest organization he appeared to have ever headed was actually a platoon in Guantanamo Bay when he was in his early 20s. So literally 40 people. Went from 40 people, a 40-person organization, to an organization that employs more like 4 million. So the fact that Tillis claims that he didn't know that Hegseth wouldn't understand large organization dynamics, a simple review of Hegseth's resume would have told you that's simply incorrect. He adds, quote, "With the passing of time, I think it's clear he's out of his depth as a manager of a large, complex organization." And Tillis adds, "I don't think his probationary period has been very positive." This is somebody who so needs to retire, because he speaks like a vintage politician, where you can never be too mean. You can never be too like, you got to be like, "I don't think his probationary period has been very positive." I'm like, dude, just say it. This dude's a fuck up, right? This dude just can't stop fucking up, right? And by the way, guys, as I've pointed out on this channel, I think he's a fall guy. Hegseth directed the move to pause these weapons shipments. But remember, the initial reporting was that it was actually the fault of Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Colby Elbridge, somebody who probably is a more classic establishment Republican with a discrete worldview that doesn't look too different from my own. So I thought it was weird that he would choose this thing to get himself in trouble with. But I think he was a fall guy. Now the new fall guy is Pete Hegseth. But again, the fact that the timing is perfectly aligned with Putin's current strategy means that I actually suspect that it wasn't even Hegseth's fault. I think he's just taking the blame because, again, as you point out, Trump is able to use the words of frustration, the words that, oh, Vladimir Putin is really aggravating me. But the part that matters is the actions, right? Just Vladimir Putin himself says a lot of things, but his actions say something different. And the fact is that Trump is doing the same thing. He's saying, well, yeah, I'm really mad at Vladimir Putin. Okay, well, you have all these tools to express your anger, to punish him for not even punish him, to introduce consequences for his unwillingness to engage in the peace process and his instead decision to ramp up the war. And so he says, well, I'm not going to take any of those actions. You're like, okay, well, then you're not actually mad. So this is like the worst parent you ever know, who's like, I'm really mad that my kid keeps talking back to me. And it's like, okay, well, what consequences do they face when they talk back? And they go, well, I don't really do consequences. And you're like, oh, okay, then you must not be that mad about them talking back to you, right? This is something that, again, you should ask yourself, if a parent of a young child, right, the average parent can understand that you get the behavior. Bad behavior needs to have consequences. That's how you turn bad behavior into good behavior. But the US president can't do this is actually low-key kind of insane. Again, the fascinating thing is, President also sidestepped direct questions earlier in the week on who in his administration ordered the pause, telling reporters, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Which is, of course, exactly what you want from a strong, in-control president who, almost every other report has said that he has almost personal control over every major decision in the administration. So the fact is that an administration that is more than almost any other administration in history, sort of a king in court system, he says, I actually don't know who's making decisions around me, which is definitely not true. And so I think, again, the reality is pretty clear that, he ordered these, or at least allowed this pause to go through. Because, again, for Vladimir Putin, he thinks Ukraine's collapse is near, and he's acting like it, right? This is according to several Kremlin insiders talking to New York Times, who simply pointed out that the Russians and Vladimir Putin, in his own assessment, says that he believes he has momentum on the battlefield. He thinks that time favors Moscow, and he thinks that he is going to get a total victory in Ukraine by simply stalling for time. And he literally thinks he is like weeks away from a total Ukrainian collapse. He expects Ukrainian defenses to fall and him to have a major, major breakthrough. And that is part of his whole strategy. This is why Putin has stalled on these peace talks. This is why he has repeatedly changed goals, even as he's extracted concessions from the West. He now adds more and more. He says, actually, I want NATO to abandon its easternmost countries. I want Ukraine to become neutral, which is, of course, code for Russia gets a veto power over all actions. And, of course, he wants to literally get veto power over Ukrainian legislative decisions. This is absolutely preposterous. This is the same thing as saying, listen, Ukraine can completely capitulate, grant me legislative, political, diplomatic, economic, and military control over your country, or simply we'll just keep fighting. But is the war effort actually going that well? Well, maybe not, because Russia has increasingly gone to a desperation playbook of literally just stealing people's stuff. Russian oligarchs are increasingly finding that their key assets, $50 billion over the past 3 years, but it really ramping up in the last several months, have really underscored the fact that, well, Russia's war funding in Ukraine looks a lot like it's drying up. We've talked about on this channel the fact that the Russian government allocated burned through the entire 2025 recruitment budget in just 3 months. So the fact is that the Russian government is increasingly robbing Peter to pay Paul simply to keep these troops in the fight. And now, some of these things, again, as you point out, is Russia seizing Western assets. But as we've talked about, the domestic companies are also being sort of leveraged out. We talked about the fact that literally just yesterday, a major Russian oligarch worth several $1 billion had his assets seized, his plane grounded, and is facing charges of real crimes, but like crimes of like having financial shell companies and committing financial fraud, which is, again, like charging a bird with flying. Okay. In Russia, literally everyone is on the take like that. So this whole thing is, I think, increasingly going to make the oligarchs Putin depends on for power increasingly nervous about who's going to get hit next. And is the Russian war economy really as good as Putin claims it is? That remains to be seen. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for today. Huge thank you to folks like Thomas Anderson, Dan Cochran, Jalen Gao, Officer Merley, Deborah Oppenheimer, Paul JW, Jeff Davies, Mike 54, Citrine Margaret, and the GMAT Club, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I hope you enjoyed today's drop. It's going to be dropping. It's literally, if you're watching this, today's videos are live. Thanks to all you guys for your support, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Cheers.